Hi. In my last post, I was sharing about a conversation I had while walking with a friend, Simone. And the subject matter of that post was about becoming an adult. And one of the big lessons of the Mythic Warrior is how to become an adult. And one of the characteristics of an adult is that we take responsibility for our lives. No matter what happened in the past, we had parents who neglected us or were checked out, who were alcoholics, who had postpartum depression, a thousand different things. And those events and that situation affected us in a lot of ways. But as long as we're focusing on them, we're not being wise. Wisdom is having being to wisdom is accepting the things that cannot be changed, and the past cannot be changed. Our parents' actions cannot be changed. Who they were cannot be changed. What can be changed is our response to all of that and its current effect on it. And as I mentioned with my own parents, particularly my father, some of his actions were very traumatic and frightening to me. And because of that, I grew up with a lack of self esteem, a need to please everyone because if I didn't, there was a big cost, there was punishment, there was pain. And, and due to that, I came into adulthood with all of these wounds and traumas. But becoming an adult is taking responsibility for that, to say, all of this happened and now it lives in me. And it is my responsibility to deal with that. It is my responsibility to heal all of those things because no one else is going to do that. So, of course, the next question for most people is how? And there are lots of ways. One of the methods I use to kind of make a little map of that is I use some of the teachings of the Four Shields medicine wheel. And it's a four directions teaching, and there are teachings of the different directions: the south, the west, the north, and the east. The teachings of the south are all about childhood. The lessons are about trust and innocence. And the arena is the body, so because of that, what might have happened in childhood and how it lives now, I may have difficulties that manifest in my body. Maybe I don't take care of myself. I don't express good self-care. Maybe I overeat. Maybe I do all of these habits that are negative. And so certainly in my journey, some of my healing had to do with discovering and owning and getting familiar with my body. And so part of my healing journey had to do with I've done diets, fasts, I've done cleanses for up to 3 weeks. I've done physical training. I've worked to discover my limits and what I could do. And so I've done things like running to Boston, which was 110 miles. Another thing I did that really focused on the body was this this incredible urge and commitment to connecting with the earth, because our bodies come from the earth. Our bodies are the earth. So I have done lots of adventures, wilderness trips. I've spent 5 months hiking in the Cascades. I've been buried underground to feel what it's like to be in the earth. I've hiked the Copper Canyon, which is this grand canyon system in the central Sierra Madre of Mexico. This canyon system that's 5 to 6 times the size of the Grand Canyon. So much of my healing was about around the South Shield, around learning trust and innocence and focusing on becoming comfortable and resilient and strengthening my body. The west shield of the medicine wheel is about the separate self. As children, we're just in the world and we're just embedded in it. But when we become adolescents, we create a self that is separate from all of that. This we could call our ego, our identity, our personality. And in the West Shield, I've also done many periods of healing. I've done personal therapy. I've had therapists, several of them, some of whom were great and some of whom weren't. I've participated in encounter groups, men's groups, 12-step recovery groups. I've been in lots of workshops, done many psychodramas, if you're familiar what that is. I've worked with guided imagery, shamanic journeying, and inner child dialogues, all to discover my inner landscape, to discover what it's like and what it isn't, and learn how to value and affirm that inner landscape. The north direction, the North Shield, is about wisdom and the giveaway. It's about becoming an adult and learning the teachings and the medicines, some of which has been around for thousands of years. I've worked with some great teachers, Stephen Foster and Meredith Little, who I apprenticed with to learn the Vision Quest. I've worked with Sun Bear, and from Sun Bear I worked with and used the pipe, the medicine pipe, for several years. I've been involved with and led sweat lodges. I've probably been involved with somewhere to 100, 150 sweat lodges. And I've written books. I wrote a book in praise of the earth. And there's also the East Shield, which is the direction of the East is about illumination and transformation. And in the East Shield, I have obviously worked with Vision Quests. I have done over 35 of them myself and taught Vision Quest to over somewhere around 200 groups over the years. And I've done plant medicine work, gone to the Amazon. So all of these may be paths as you or discover, where you were wounded, where you have trauma, where those wounds of your past are still influencing you. Your focus may be in particular around one of these directions more than others, about childhood and trust and innocence, or about illumination and visionary experiences, or, as I suspect for most of you, there is some amount of work you'll want to do around each of these. But there's one particular practice I want to speak about, and that is the inner child dialogues. In 1991, I began a process of doing inner child dialogues, which was like a precursor to what is now known as internal family systems. In the early 90s, I, again, after being in crisis or in pain after breaking up with a woman who I'd been engaged to, and at the end of that breakup, I felt worthless, rejected, and like I had little to no self-esteem. And many people over the years have talked about, shame and low self-esteem, feeling like they can never be good enough. And that's really common. And if I had to talk about one practice I did in my life, which made the greatest difference in that, it would be doing these inner child dialogues. So after this breakup, I was really upset and in the pits. And fortunately, at that point, I came across a book. It was called Healing Your Aloneness. And I read that book. And the basic theme of that book was that how we feel about our lives has everything to do with how the child in us is being treated. So that determines how we feel about our lives. It's not about what makes us most successful or not, because very often you can become successful by ignoring the child in you, by working 8 hours a week, by um, getting involved in some situation that gives you no time for rest or but no time to play. You can sometimes achieve success by becoming a workaholic and essentially ignoring the needs of the child. But this theme was about how you feel about your lives. And so I realized that a lot of that feeling of pain and worthlessness and shame uh, that I had may have been, like the book said, due to how the child in me was being treated. And when I was honest with myself, I realized I did not treat that child very well. I would just, and I could see it in large and small things. I might be working, fixing my car, and I'd drop a screwdriver and I'd say, "Oh, you friggin' idiot." Obviously, there has to be some part of me that goes, "Ouch." Or I'd be walking downtown and I'd notice in the big plate glass windows of the hardware store, I'd walk by and see a reflection of my image, and this voice would say, "Oh, you look like shit." And so I could see that there was some part of me that was being attacked, that was not being loved, and that some part where the adult voice was critical, was hostile, and was not loving. So this book suggested several ways that one could work with this, and I decided to do two practices. My first practice was that every morning I would write, for 20 minutes, I would write a loving letter to the child inside of me. I would come out with a pen and paper. I would start writing on the paper, and I'd use my right hand, my dominant hand, to write a letter to that child. "Dear Sparrow, I just want you to know that today we have to do this, we have to do that, but I really want your needs to get met." So I committed to every day write at 20 minutes in the morning this loving letter to that child in me. And in the evening, for 10 minutes, I would speak out loud loving words and phrases and affirmations to that child while rubbing my belly, because I figured the adult, the conscious, rational part of me, lived up here. But obviously the child in me lived in the belly, so I'd speak loving words to that child while rubbing my belly. So I committed to do this morning and evening for 1 year. A lot of times when I say that to people, they go, 1 year, that's a long time. And in some sense, yeah, it is. But the point of view is, just imagine that you were a foster parent and all of a sudden you're going to welcome a child into your house, a child who had been ignored, abused, treated badly for, who knows, years in his or her life. If you were that foster parent and invite the child in, having a nice weekend would not cure all that. It would need to be consistent and over time so that trust could build. So I began that practice. It was 1991. And I remember the first time I did it, I was working as a building contractor. I went out onto the porch in the morning, and like I said, I took the pad of paper and with my right hand started writing, "Dear Sparrow, yeah, we have to do work today and blah, 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 but I want your needs to get met," and da, 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 da. And that felt like good. And then I put the pen into my left hand to let the child write back. And believe me, when I was writing with my left hand, it definitely looked like a child's scrawl. And what that child wrote back was, "Fuck you. Fuck you. You care about my needs. Yeah, right. Stick it up, my God. You're doing..." Anyway, it was like, wow. This child was not going to just sing Kumbaya and say everything was okay. So, but my commitment was to write a loving letter. So after the child responded that way, I put the pen back in my right hand and wrote again, yeah, you're right. You have no reason to believe me. I have made promises to you many a time, promises and resolutions, and they've not lasted. So I get it. You really don't really have a reason to believe me. But I want you to know that this time I am going to show up every day and be here for you for at least these 20 minutes in the morning and these 10 minutes at night. And then I'd give the pen back. And again, he was not convinced. It was like, yeah, yeah, stick it where the sun don't shine. Or yeah, you'll consider my needs until the first woman you're attracted to comes by, and then you will just throw me in the trash and do everything you can to please her, because she's what's important to you, not me. And again, I'd have to say, yeah, you're right. I've done that many a time. And so this process went on, and it was just one of the most important things I did in my life. And so many times I would have to be a loving adult in those moments, I would have to say, yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know how to love you. I never learned it from mom and dad. They weren't good at it. So I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. But I want you to know that day after day after day, I will get better at it. Or to say something like, yeah, and I will be here and show up and be present and love and care for you, whether you believe me or not. I will be here and show up and be present for you, even when you hate me. And da da da. And again and again, the response would come back of the unbelieving child, and I would have to validate him, validate and mirror his experience, and respond to it as a loving man, as a loving adult. And and I'd have to not only show up and be loving. To be a loving adult means also telling the truth. Means saying, I will protect you. Yes, so and so is not very kind and says mean things. I will not let that happen. Was to be, I won't put you around where you can be injured by other people, where you can be hurt, humiliated by other people. Or I will tell you the truth. Oh, when so and so said that mean thing, it was not about you. To say, everyone who comes to this earth has the responsibility or the job to be as loving as he or she can be. And yesterday, when he or she said that, she was just not doing her job. It wasn't and isn't about you. So this process went on and on. And I did do it for a whole year, but I want to say it was somewhere, as I remember, maybe about 3 weeks before all of that began to change, and the conversation just got friendlier, and something was building between us. And it changed everything in my life. Everything in my life. It even changed what I could physically do. I remember one time when I was out in this canyon in the Last Chance Range in Death Valley, and I went up the canyon and I climbed a steep rock wall, maybe 20, 25 feet high, and to get further up in the canyon above. And on my way back and back down, I had to climb down that wall. And so I remember climbing back down that wall, and all of a sudden I froze. And I don't know if any of you have ever had this experience of just freezing, and it was like a gridlock. All of a sudden I'm on this cliff, and my sense, and there is a foothold down there. If I could just relax enough, I could reach it. But the fact that I wasn't reaching it just made me tighten up, and it was kind of this gridlock. And so I I was stuck there and I didn't want to be stuck there. And I remember for about a couple of minutes saying all those rational things, trying to talk myself out of it. Rational things like, oh, you went up this cliff, so if you went up it, you can come down. And that's probably true. Or rational things like, you've climbed harder things than this. And that was certainly true. And I just kept on saying those rational things, and they didn't make any difference. And I was just there on the cliff, and all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, all those rational things were coming up here from the head. But the person who was scared was someone down in the belly. And I realized by saying all those rational things, I was essentially trying to say, stop having the experience you're having. You know, stop being scared. You know, listen to me, not to yourself. And so when I realized that, I just stopped, took a couple breaths and just changed my whole way of speaking. And I began saying things like, I just want you to know, if you need to stay right here where you are and not move, I will stay with you. I'd like to climb down, but if you're not ready, I'll be here with you. Also, I want you to know that if something happened and you fell, I would be lying with you at the bottom. You would not be alone. I would still be with you, and I'd still be there caring for you, and you wouldn't be alone. And so I just changed the whole dialogue like that. And honestly, after about a minute, I just climbed right down. So what I want to say to some of you, or for those of you who have trouble with self-esteem, or you have lots of self-criticism and don't feel you're good enough, that can be changed. What's happening is you don't have a loving adult voice. And you may be like me, that since I didn't grow up with one naturally, I wasn't taught that. Even though that's true, it can be developed. With practice, I had to develop it. I had to develop it and practice it until it became the default voice. And I want to tell you that today, I have a pretty good relationship to that child part of me. I hardly ever, other than for, an hour or something, get down on myself. Or when I do, I immediately say, oh, what do I need to do now? What's my inner landscape need? And I can quickly say, yeah, grant me the serenity to change what I can. And I know how to make that change. So I want to share this with you for all of you who might struggle with lack of self-care, lack of self-esteem, self-criticism, and let you know that I healed this, and my critical voice was really pretty bad at times, and it isn't today. And I will want to let you know it's my belief and faith that if I could make that big a change, and as I said, it made a huge change in my life and how I felt about my life and how much I enjoyed my life. It made a huge change. And my hope and prayer is that you can become an adult and take responsibility for your life as it is now. And if you do, that decision is the most important thing in the world. And if you make that decision, the only next question is, how are you going to do it? What do I need to do to heal that? And bless you, I know you can.